So I was on the official website of the Jehovah's Witnesses again recently and came across an article that, I must admit, completely fascinated me. It shocked me because, having left a number of years ago and not being exposed to that one perspective every bloody day, the programming really becomes evident. It reminds me of that old David Foster Wallace analogy you've likely heard before. You know, the one where an old fish crosses the path of two younger fish, saying, "Hey boys, how's the water?" A few seconds pass and one of the fishes looks to the other and says, "What the hell is water?" This is the way worldviews are. You don't even recognize how embedded you are until you give yourself some distance. We're going to get into that article in a moment. Following that, I'm going to tell you about a manifestation or law of attraction concept called paradigms. For those of you new to my channel, the law of attraction is our focus here. And if you're a believing member of the Jehovah's Witnesses, I'm not going to insult your intelligence and tell you that I don't have beliefs. Now, I am an ex-witness who is deeply critical of your leadership. And just like you, I have a worldview that I believe is grounded in fact. So don't think I'm condescending to you when I speak of your quote-unquote programming. We all have a program or a paradigm. My goal today is not to tell you where your worldview is wrong, but rather to make you aware of the waters you're swimming in, the waters we all swim in. Let's get right into it. Hey good people, I'm Derek London. Thanks for checking out my channel. Around here we talk about everything law of attraction. We discuss a lot about the psychological, scientific, and rational basis for subscribing to this philosophy of mine. And in fact, if your reality could stand some change for the better, you have only to start there, with your mind. Hit that subscribe button and settle in, because your life will never be the same. Hey folks, thanks again for watching. Now before I share this article, I want to relate a tiny anecdote. I once knew this guy who bought a brand new Buick LeSabre. It was a nice looking car, even in spite of its color, which was bright pink. And it was funny because he was kind of a portly, stocky guy, you know, so his buddies would always tease him for owning a pink car. But his response to them was the same every time. He'd say, "It's not pink, it's salmon." And he was technically right. It was salmon. But you know what? It was pink too. It was the color of pink salmon. So let me share this article with you. It's really brief. It's on jw.org under Frequently Asked Questions, and it's entitled, "Are Jehovah's Witnesses Protestants?" I've called them a Protestant denomination in my other videos. Even when I was pioneering, I remember getting questions like this and recall how semantical the conversation would become. So out of frustration, I would just own it. When people would ask me if we were Protestants, I would just say, well, by the letter of the definition, I suppose you could say that, despite us having certain distinct teachings from most Protestant branches. As a pioneer, I felt this was the fairest way of answering the question without looking like a liar or I had something to hide. But let's read the official answer from the so-called faithful and discreet slave. Here's how they address the question. No, Jehovah's Witnesses are Christians, but we do not consider ourselves to be Protestants. Why not? Protestantism has been defined as a religious movement opposing Roman Catholicism. While it's true that Jehovah's Witnesses disagree with teachings of the Catholic Church, we do not consider ourselves to be Protestant for the following reasons. Before I continue reading, put a pin in that definition, a religious movement opposing Roman Catholicism. Here's their first answer. A number of Protestant beliefs conflict with what the Bible actually teaches. For example, the Bible teaches that there is one God, not a Trinity. And it clearly teaches that God punishes the wicked, not in hellfire, but with eternal destruction. End quote. Already, does anybody else feel like the goalpost is being moved here? I detect a syllogism. That is that they're saying the Trinity and hellfire doctrines are essential in qualifying as a Protestant branch of Christianity. While these are certainly common teachings among Reformed churches, this is hardly something that defines them. If it did, then Roman Catholicism would itself qualify as a Protestant religion. Such doctrines are not essential to pass as a Protestant denomination. Recall the witness's definition, a religious movement opposing Roman Catholicism. The Trinity and hellfire has nothing to do with it. Besides, Mormons, Christadelphians, and Oneness Pentecostals are all Protestant churches which reject the Trinity. Similarly, most evangelical Protestants teach that hell is in fact separation from God, where fire and brimstone is merely metaphorical of such a state. Seventh-day Adventists, parallel to the witnesses, teach that hell is eternal destruction. You see what the article is doing? All religious movements opposing Catholicism are Protestant. All Protestants teach hellfire and the Trinity, ergo Jehovah's Witnesses are not Protestant. In logic, this can be annotated thusly: all A is C, all B is A, therefore all B is C. It's a syllogism. Here's their next answer. It continues. We do not protest against or attempt to reform the Catholic Church or any other religious group. On the contrary, we simply preach the good news of God's kingdom, endeavoring to help others build faith in that good news. We are interested not in attempting to reform other religious groups, but in teaching sincere individuals the truth about God and His Word, the Bible. End quote. And here we discover another syllogism, and even an out-and-out contradiction. The syllogism is that they are conflating protest with attempts at reformation. Now, much like the last example, it's true that some forms of protest are also attempts to reform. For example, I can protest at the Parliament building here in Victoria regarding the increase of cruise ships and freighter traffic on the Strait of Georgia and the Salish Sea. Depending on my message, it can be said that my protest is an attempt to reform public policy. On the other hand, I could wear placards and protest on the street near my local Kingdom Hall with no designs on reforming them. There are many who do this to raise awareness and couldn't care less if the religion burnt to the ground or changed their policies. Now let's address the other issue, the contradiction. They've defined Protestantism as a religious movement opposing Roman Catholicism, yet deny they suffice as Protestants because they're not protesting the Catholic Church. Instead, they are merely teaching Catholics and others the truth. Okay, so on this logic then, I suppose that apostates should cease being called apostates because they're not protesting or reforming the Jehovah's Witnesses, but are indeed endeavoring to teach members the truth about some of its corruptions and falsehoods. Oh, but you see, that's different. It's different because that's not pink, it's salmon. Apostates are in opposition to the one true religion. And witnesses are not Protestants because Protestants are reformers who believe in the Trinity and hellfire. You know what? Let's have it their way. It's salmon. It's pink Atlantic salmon. That article absolutely floored me. I can't believe how deft they are at spinning their rhetoric. Even as a pioneer, I knew that we qualified as a Protestant religion. Isn't it much more respectable just to own it? The reasoning is so sloppy. It's obviously only the ones who have real skin in the game who will overlook such chicanery. But this is right on their About Us page. Do they think they're fooling anyone? That's a good question to ask, because I've actually thought about this a lot. I've spoken to many members who simply won't allow room for the possibility that they might be mistaken. And here's the conclusion I've come to. I don't think they're trying to be deceptive. Maybe some of them are, but I think they genuinely believe this answer. Now, I'm making more of this than I probably should. In the grand scheme of things, the Jehovah's Witnesses being Protestant is quite trivial. But this sort of rhetorical acrobatics is very revealing, isn't it? What we are discussing here is a paradigm. It's a worldview. So much of our beliefs are framed by what we value. Let's just take a simple example. Let's take two words like freedom and security. Both of these are great things on their own. But of course, if you value freedom more than you do security, then even the most impenetrable walls will seem like a prison. And if you value security instead, then even the lushest of green forests will be as threatening as a battlefield. That's just a simple example to show what's happening here. What we value, or whatever threatens what we value, can be stated as either pink or salmon. The two colors are utterly identical. We have made a distinction without a difference. But in evaluative terms, when speaking of stout men in Buick LeSabres, pink and salmon are worlds apart, just like purple and the color of royalty. Evaluative statements can be both subjective and objective. It's possible for some things to be simultaneously true and false depending upon your angle that you're looking at it. Let's just take the witnesses again. If you're a member and you feel that false religion is the greatest evil and blight upon mankind, then I can understand why you might be inclined to be distinct from all the others. Not different for good reasons necessarily, but different for its own sake. Different for the sake of being different. I can understand why such ones are vulnerable to making distinctions that are not distinctions at all. It also explains why when some leave the witnesses, they go from one sense of ultimate truth to the other. What's changed? The level of belief hasn't. It's simply your angle. Because heaven forbid that a tough guy be seen in a pink Buick LeSabre. Okay, so what do you do about it? Well, you can accept it. Once you know you have a paradigm, seemingly unforgivable offenses are not quite as distressing or disorienting. You ever notice how simply understanding an issue, understanding the way you think and the way others think, it may not get rid of the problem, but it makes it much easier to face. When you sign on to one absolute truth, you will forever find yourself in a hostile environment where you are the perpetual victim. Remember, having an explanation for someone's behavior is not the same as excusing it. So that's how you can handle the religious issue. Be mindful of the object and the perspective you take toward it. And that applies to both witnesses and non-witnesses. But coming away from that, knowing how paradigms work, gives you an extraordinary amount of power. When you become self-aware, you become a creator of your own life as opposed to some passing organism that is blown around by the wind of circumstance. Earlier, I mentioned that beliefs are driven by what you value. Well, what is value? Value is something you give your focus to. That's all it is. This works with stock markets, real estate, and sociocultural dynamics. It drives just about everything. Ever notice how when the economy becomes insecure, everyone buys up gold and its worth grows exponentially? Why is that? Among many reasons, gold is a unit of value that is about as non-perishable as anything you can find. It's everlasting. But there's nothing implicitly precious about gold. It doesn't do anything. Money is not to be confused with gold, but gold is the most tangible object of value. So if your reality can really stand to be improved upon, nothing outside of you necessarily needs to change. You simply need to change what you value. You need to change what you focus on. As I've demonstrated, value frames your beliefs, it drives your rhetoric, and it influences how you see reality. And there are some really practical ways that you can change your focus. I've done a number of videos on paradigms, which will be linked below in the description and in the end screen. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. For those of you who've played with this idea, tell me how you've created wealth or changed your external circumstances simply by shifting what you focus on. This is Derek London. Thanks again for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon. Until then. Hey guys, did you like this video? You know what to do. And if something I mentioned today resonated with you, click one of them cards on this screen. I have lots of related content sure to interest you. Thanks as always for your views, and we'll see you next time.